What is up, everybody? Icyymike back again today to bring you another tutorial for Stellaris, the grand strategy space game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split up this tutorial into two explicit parts. The first part is going to cover how to make sectors and when to make them. And then part 2 is going to be a little bit more advanced. We're going to talk about sector strategies, sector size and distribution, and some extras at the end. So I hope you guys find this helpful, so let's get to it. Okay, so first, how do you create a sector? Well, it's pretty simple. You come up to the Empire tab, then you hit Create New Sector, and you just hit the plus button here on each system. And you can see as you connect them, more become available. So they have to be touching each other for you to be able to make them, or put them into the sector. So you add as many as you want, doesn't matter, and just keep in mind to remove them, it takes 25 influence. So keep that in mind before you misclick. So once you create that sector, you're done, you assign it a leader, and essentially that sector is now operating on its own with the help of the governor. So let's talk about when to make sectors, because I think this is important. Sectors are supposed to help you when it comes to micromanagement, and as you know, if we play on the 1000 galaxy map, that would be a lot of systems to manage. So that's where the sectors come in. You have a limit of 5 unless you get a bonus from your race to do more, but you do, or you're playing with a mod that enables more. But vanilla, you get 5. So once you get 5 colonized planets, you start getting penalized to create more, or to colonize more planets. So keep that in mind. Now, the penalty to me isn't that bad. You get a reduction in energy and influence. So you can actually build more and colonize more and hold on to that penalty for a little bit and be okay. But usually once you, especially early game, once you hit about 5, you want to go ahead and create a sector. And you want to kind of pre-plan your sectors and know what you're doing. You just don't want to do it randomly. And one thing I do want to note is you got to remember that sectors take a long time to become useful. It just doesn't happen as soon as you create the sector that they start producing. And we're going to go over some strategies to kind of help you get them more productive faster. But that's in part 2, the advanced section. Okay, so how should I design my sectors, and how should I make them, and when should I do it? Well, there's 2 strategies to creating sectors. There's what I like to call the dump and quick expansion method, and then there's the pre-development method. So let's go over the dump and expand way. What you would do is you would basically get about 3 or 4 colony ships all at once, if you can afford it, sometimes 1 or 2, and you would quickly colonize planets all at the same time, and then you would throw them in a sector together without ever putting anything on them. Now, the pre-development strategy is different, where you colonize the planets, you develop them yourself a little bit, and then you hand them off into the sectors. And in the part 2 of this tutorial, we'll cover when to use each of those methods. So let's go ahead and move to part 2. So sector strategies. So we covered how to make sectors and when to make them, but what about the actual strategy to it? Well, when you create your first sector, usually when you have 5 planets, my first suggestion would be to make it a balanced or core sector. And this is going to be just due to the fact that it's early game, you don't have a lot going on, and when you're building those first 5 colonies, you need to build energy, you need to build minerals, you're going to need to build food, they're going to need everything, just so you can keep growing and expand. If you just do one focus, you're going to become out of balance right off the start, and you don't want that. You want to keep growing. So usually that first sector, I keep it small and I keep it balanced. But later on, I'm going to switch that balanced core sector to a energy focus once I start on my second sector. So that brings us to our second sector. So now we've colonized 5 planets, we put them in a first sector, and now we're colonizing more planets, and they're going to fall into our second sector. This second sector, I am going to do as a mineral focus, because now we're getting to where we need more minerals because we're going to start expanding and building a lot of stuff. So how would I set up my sector? Well, first let's understand the sector screen. Here we have our leader, how many colonies in that sector, the colony size, and the population. This is how you feed resources into the sector, which is really, really important because especially when the sector starting out is going to be using every resource it has to be building itself up to help you out later. So you need to be feeding it, investing in it, so that way it builds faster. So anything you have left over that you're not using, make sure you come in here and you feed your sectors until they're producing on their own. Okay, here you have your focuses, so you can do a military focus, an industrial focus, a research focus, and a financial focus. This is basically your tax rate on them. You click this and you can set it to 0, 25, 50, or 75%. And then this is the most important part of the sector screen. And this determines how your AI is going to manage that sector. If you have allow redevelopment check, that means the AI will take down buildings you have already built and replace them with what it thinks should be placed there. Respect tile resources. If we go and we look at a planet, you can see that on the surface we have certain resources for each tile. If we have respect tile resources checked, that means the AI will only build what is available based on these tiles. So it will only build power here, it will only build food here, and only build minerals here. If we uncheck it, it can build anything there, which is important when you want a specific sector to have a strong focus. If you want it to be a completely focused mineral sector, then you need to uncheck respect tile resources, so it will just ignore those and build whatever your focus is. So make sure you understand that. Okay, so you built your first one, that was a balanced one. You built your second sector and we did a mineral focus. And how would you set that up? Well, you would do industrial, which is minerals. And then what I would do is I would allow redevelopment and uncheck respect tile resources. And I wouldn't have a tax rate at the beginning, depending on the economy, whether you can afford it or not. I wouldn't, so that because you're just going to hinder its growth. And I would be dumping into it here, making sure it grows. So what this is going to do is this is going to give the AI the ability to build whatever it wants, wherever it wants, but it's going to build only minerals because that is its focus. Now, at first, the most important part of the AI's mind when creating a sector or managing it is population. Obviously, you need people to operate your stuff, so it is going to try to get people there first. So it's going to build food stuff. So don't freak out when you go and check your sectors and it's only built food buildings. It's doing that for a reason. It's going to build the food and then it's going to take them down and build the minerals. This is why pre-development makes it a little bit quicker in terms of getting to your focus faster, but when you're rapidly expanding, you don't have time to micromanage, so that's when we switch to the dump and expand. So let's go ahead and cover that. When do you use the dump and expand, which is just putting all the new colonies you just got in a sector without ever building anything, or when do you pre-develop them? Well, it's pretty simple. If what you're colonizing or that sector has a lot of planets that are big, it's going to take a long time for that AI to really get population there. So I suggest trying to pre-develop them as much as possible. If it's a small planet, and by that I mean it has a lower number of surface tiles, then go ahead and put it in the dump and expand category. Let the AI do it because it's not going to take very long for it to manage that one. Okay, so now that you understand that, how big should your sectors be? There's no completely right answer, but my personal preference is at the very start, I like to keep them small. So 5 planets or less, not systems. So 5 planets that I've colonized or less for each sector. Once we get to the mid or late game, I up it to about 10 to even maybe 20 per sector, depending. You got to use your best judgment, but I like to keep my sectors at about 10 to 20 late game, which is still relatively small. I like to keep them diversified. So, and the reason for this is I like to keep my sectors relatively small and spread apart, not next to each other. So I don't want two energy sectors next to each other, and I really want to diversify and have multiple sectors, multiple focuses everywhere. And the reason why is if I get attacked and someone knocks out one of my sectors, it's not going to cripple me. If I have only one mineral sector and they take out a big portion of that, I am screwed. But if I spread it out, it's going to be harder for them to really cripple my economy. Also, another tip for you guys is to rename your sectors. And you do this by double clicking. And I do this so that way just visually I can see which sectors are what. So when it comes to creating a strategy and knowing what to defend, I know exactly which sector is which, and I don't have to go all the way back to kind of try to identify. I do want to cover the different focuses. Minerals, pretty self-explanatory. It's going to generate minerals and only build mineral buildings if you have it set up the way I told you to. Energy is only going to build the energy buildings if you have it set up with allow redevelopment and respect unchecked. And then, what I really want to talk about is research and military focus. So military focus, I really try to avoid. I just don't think it's that beneficial, and I prefer to have a full control over my army. So I just hotkey my planets down here up to about 9 of them with spaceports, and I build my army that way. So that way my sectors can worry about other things, and I can build the army with what I have and what the sectors are giving me in terms of the tax rate. Also, with research, I always like to have research sectors. But one thing you need to keep in mind, these need to fall into the pre-development strategy of creating them. And here is why. If you do it in the dump and expand, the AI is randomly going to choose one of these 3 resources, and your research is going to quickly become out of balance. But if you pre-develop them, and then if you don't allow redevelopment, then the AI is going to respect what you built, and then it's just going to build additional ones. So that way you're not completely out of balance when it comes to your research sectors. And that's very important to remember, because you can't choose which one of these to focus on unless it has, that particular system has a whole bunch of tiles that are research specific. Then you can maybe respect tile resources. So a couple things I want to cover, just some tips. One thing is tax rate. At the beginning of a sector, when I just build it, I don't really like to tax it, not for very long, but I just think it hinders the growth. So if I can get away with it, I do not tax it, and I dump all of what I can into it, both minerals and energy, to make sure it's building. Then once it gets off the ground and it starts building a little bit, then I will just bump it up to 75, because at that point I can just fill it up with what I've got. It's giving me stuff, and then I'm returning it back to it. So how do I make my sectors? Well, the first one is usually energy. The second and third are usually mineral focus. The next one, the fourth one, will be another energy focus. And then after that, I will do research, maybe a military one, just kind of play with it, and then more minerals. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more tutorials, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like, and comment. It helps me out a ton. And I love making these videos, so I will be making another tutorial for you guys soon.